The stones of London hide more than just history. Beneath the English capital, where maps hesitate to detail and tourist guides avert their gaze, there are structures that don't appear in modern records but have, for centuries, stirred unease among scholars, conspiracists, and even members of the Crown. The underground of Buckingham Palace is one of these zones of silence, a buried layer beneath the weight of tradition and authority, where the bricks seem to hold something denser than mortar, an ancestral pact. During structural renovations and discreet inspections carried out over the centuries, evidence of sealed corridors, inscriptions in ancient dialects, and rooms lined with materials that don't match any known architecture have been documented and archived, far from the public eye. Why are these areas avoided by staff? What caused engineers to abruptly end excavations? And above all, what is the secret the British Crown hides beneath its very own feet? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube show the videos to more people, and for me to keep bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get to the video. If you've ever seen an image of Buckingham Palace, you probably thought the same as everyone else. Tradition, elegance, power. But almost no one stops to think about what lies beneath it. And that's exactly where things start to get interesting. There's a basement there that doesn't appear on any publicly available map. No tourist tunnels, no war shelter. I'm talking about a network of corridors too ancient to be modern and too organized to be natural. During the Tudor period, documents already mentioned forbidden cellars, places where no servant was allowed to enter, and those who did often didn't come back the same. One such record, preserved in the British Library, describes a place where not even a candle stays lit. Now think with me. Why would someone write that in an official court journal? We're not talking about a horror story. We're talking about a real environment, directly connected to the monarchy. In the 18th century, when the palace underwent renovations, some architectural plans simply ignored certain sections of the basement. And it wasn't a drafting error. There are copies of these plans with handwritten notes in the margins. Access not recommended, unstable structure. Strange, right? Engineers know how to deal with unstable structures. But what were they really avoiding? During World War II, a civilian team was tasked with adapting the palace basements to shelter members of the royal family. One of the engineers, Thomas Whitlow, wrote in his personal diary, later preserved by his own family, that he found rooms already excavated, with heavy air, as if they were waiting for something. And he spoke of a smell, something that mixed rust, mold, and an undertone of stagnant flesh. His words, not mine. Decades later, in the 1970s, an electrical problem in the palace's vicinity led National Grid technicians into those areas. What they found was never disclosed, but the work was abruptly halted and never resumed. One of the technicians mentioned in a confidential interview that sensors went haywire beneath the West Wing. Lights flickered, batteries drained, all without explanation. Rumors began to spread among those working inside. Older employees referred to the basements as the part that breathes. Yes, that's right. And it's not a metaphor. They said the air down there had life, that walls sweated without a source of water, that metallic sounds came from nowhere. One of them quit his job after being trapped in one of those corridors for 17 minutes, long enough, according to him, to hear footsteps that weren't his. Curiously, none of these accounts openly speak of ghosts or monsters. What everyone describes is a deep unease, as if something existed down there that doesn't belong to the surface. Something old that watches in silence. This appears in reports separated by decades from different people with no connection to each other. Coincidence? And the most unsettling part is the Crown's response, none. When journalists or researchers try to raise the topic, everything is classified as national security. Even formal radar scanning requests are denied. Everything is dismissed with a firmness that strangely resembles fear. Fear of what might be discovered. In 2008, a group of archaeologists proposed mapping the area using non-invasive technology. Seemed harmless, right? But the project was blocked before it even got off the ground. One of the participants said that someone from above recommended abandoning it. The question is, who exactly has the power to silence a historical study with that level of effectiveness? The most accurate reports mention doors without handles, hexagonal chambers, and curved corridors with impossible acoustics. None of these elements match any known era of English architecture. And worse, people who enter these areas usually return silent, or resign. Some simply disappear from history. None of this shows up in guided tours, of course. No one mentions the sealed sectors, the corridors the guides avoid. But those who work behind the scenes know there's something down there. Something the monarchy, generation after generation, has decided to keep buried. But for how much longer? There is a river in London that almost no one knows about, but it flows through the city silently, like a forgotten artery. Its name is Tyburn. Today, channeled beneath layers of concrete and busy streets, it runs virtually in silence, until it reaches the underground of Buckingham Palace. And it is at this point that it ceases to be just a stream and becomes part of something much deeper and much darker. For centuries, Tyburn was the stage for public executions. It was common for criminals to be hanged on its banks. But what few know is that the river was also used for disposal, not just of bodies, but of organic waste coming directly from the palace. This included medical material, bloodied fabrics, and according to some 19th century medical records, human waste of unspecified origin. Doesn't it seem strange that, in the very heart of royalty, blood would flow into a river that no one sees anymore? Geologists who studied the subsoil of Westminster confirm that Tyburn's waters are still active, but chemically altered. The acidity level is higher than normal, which has led some researchers to theorize that it may have been contaminated with large-scale decomposition remains. And here comes the chilling part. There are reports from sewage network workers who, during routine inspections near the palace, found human bones, but deformed. Bones with compression marks and were incompatible with time or natural causes. These discoveries were never formalized. Instead, the workers were ordered to leave the area, and subsequent teams were exclusively military. Why would the army be interested in sewer inspections? And why, after these visits, were the access points completely sealed, as if something needed to be contained? Many believe that the palace's basements, in addition to serving as storage and cells, also functioned as a kind of hidden necropolis. But not in the traditional sense of burial. The flooded chambers where the Tyburn seeps through seem to have been shaped to preserve, not eliminate. Reinforced walls, twisted metal bars, and stone platforms with visible drag marks. Something, or someone, was taken there and left beneath the water. Former staff report that, on certain nights, especially during political transitions or royal events, a thick and abnormal fog would cover the palace gardens. Not the usual London fog, but a condensation that came from below, from the ground itself, smelling of iron and salt. Some said they heard, at those moments, a bubbling sound, as if something was breathing beneath them. It may sound exaggerated, but why do so many reports point to the same signs? In the late 1990s, a technician from Thames Water recorded an incident in which the pressure in the underground valves exploded without any apparent mechanical cause. According to him, the system seemed to be pushed from the inside out. The report was shelved. No conclusive analysis was ever released. But since then, sector workers refused to operate near the palace without external accompaniment. One of the most disturbing theories suggests that something was fed there, something that lives or existed long enough to adapt to that environment. A kind of forgotten biology, perhaps not human, perhaps mutated by darkness, by time, or by practices that today would be considered unthinkable. Could it be that Tyburn, this hidden river, became not just a sewer channel, but a dark womb for a marginal form of life? Many accounts coincide in mentioning hands emerging from sewer grates near the palace. But never full hands, always deformed, pale, with fingers elongated like roots. This, combined with recurring visions of vague faces in the mist, reinforces the suspicion that what lives there is not completely dead, but also not alive in the way we understand. And even if all this were just urban myth, a possibility we can't entirely dismiss, why does the Crown adamantly refuse to seal those passages? Why keep alive a river that no one sees? Why continue channeling to a place that, officially, does not exist? It may sound like a horror movie, but the traces are there, in shelved reports, in ignored testimonies, in scratched-out maps, and above all, in the sepulchral silence surrounding any attempt at explanation. Tyburn flows, invisible, and with it, something else flows, something London chose to forget. Have you ever stopped to wonder why the British monarchy is one of the most resilient in the world? Even after revolutions, scandals, world wars, and social protests, it remains standing, untouched, almost sacred. Is it just tradition? Or is there another force silently sustaining this empire, far from the public eye? Some scholars believe it's not just the royal family that rules. There is another court, hidden beneath the layers of visible power. A group that, over the centuries, has reshaped itself, concealed itself, and above all, survived. Isolated documents, old letters, and even accounts from within the palace itself mention figures who participated in nighttime meetings in the subterranean sections, always on the margins of official records. These figures, according to reports from 19th century servants, wore masks, not as ornament but as part of protocol. White masks, smooth, expressionless. They arrived unannounced and descended through the palace's restricted wings. A diary kept by a butler between 1853 and 1860 describes one of these gatherings as a silent assembly where faces do not age. The diary was confiscated years later and never seen again. During Queen Victoria's reign, even stranger reports emerged. She herself is said to have participated in nighttime ceremonies in underground chambers, accompanied by figures who were not part of the official aristocracy. Medical records point to an unexplained rejuvenation during that period. Victoria, who suffered from fatigue and chronic migraines, suddenly regained vigor and health after what was called a private spiritual retreat. But that retreat took place underground, and she's not the only one. Throughout the 20th century, members of the royal family appear in photos and events with expressions, postures, and features eerily similar to each other, even across different generations. Sure, it could be genetics, but what if it's something else? What if, instead of lineage, we're dealing with transfer? Many people have heard of reptilians. Others speak of vampires. But those words are simplifications, metaphors created to try to explain what we don't understand. What some theories suggest is that these hidden nobles don't feed on blood or flesh. They feed on time, on longevity, on memory, on historical cycles that repeat while they remain, changing faces, switching names, but never leaving the throne. A former Royal Guard officer, interviewed anonymously in the 2000s, claimed that certain figures seen during night patrols did not belong to the Windsor family, but had unrestricted access to the forbidden wings. And more, they didn't speak to the guards, but stared at them for too long. A strange, prolonged, uncomfortable silence, as if they were reading the soldier from the inside. The architecture of the underground chambers reinforces this suspicion. Many of them are hexagonal, with smooth black columns and embossed inscriptions that match no known language. Some say these structures function as ritual rooms, not in a religious sense, but an energetic one, as if they were access points, places of exchange where time changes direction. And then comes an intriguing detail. During Queen Elizabeth II's Jubilee, security sensors monitored by independent teams detected gravitational fluctuations in the palace's east wing. It may sound like fiction, but the data exists and was recorded by scientists who weren't even studying the palace, but were monitoring the city for another project. Coincidence? Or a clue that slipped through the cracks? There's an even darker theory, and here I invite you to reflect carefully. What if these figures aren't just part of the royalty? What if they are the origin of it? A parallel lineage, older, more silent, that uses the royal family as a front, as an intermediary? That would explain the monarchy's resilience. It's not just a political system. It's a capsule, a shell that guards what truly matters. Who, then, are these members of the hidden court? No one knows for sure. But perhaps the most important thing isn't knowing who they are, but understanding what they want. Because if what is said is true, if they really consume time, not flesh, then what's at stake isn't just England's history, but the future of everything that has yet to happen. When something is too powerful to be erased, it is hidden. And when hiding is not enough, it is turned into myth. That's how time protects its darkest secrets, not with locks, but with forgetting. In the case of Buckingham's underground, this forgetting doesn't seem to be an accident, but a process carefully maintained for centuries. Many believe the palace dungeons are deactivated, that they were sealed after the Tudor era or repurposed as storage. But more recent accounts suggest the opposite. Guards who disappear from their posts for days, members of parliament who vanish from the public agenda and return visibly shaken, staff who refuse to talk about certain wings. Everything points to ongoing activity, not just historical remnants. According to an investigation conducted by a former Guardian journalist, now distanced from the profession, there are sectors of the palace that require triple authorization to access: military, civil, and internal crown approval. This is unusual even for nuclear facilities. The official reason? Archive security. But curiously, access to these places always happens at night and is carried out by people not listed in the royal household's records. There are also unconfirmed reports of rooms with artificially maintained temperatures below 5 degrees and controlled atmospheric pressure. Why would a building meant to house human beings have climate-controlled chambers like a biological lab? What's the need for such tight control, especially in areas with no public access and no regular use? The most frequently whispered name among internal staff is the breathing room. Supposedly located on one of the lower levels, it's said to be a space where the walls release vapor at regular intervals, as if the space itself were exhaling. Some speak of sounds resembling murmurs, but always in languages no one can identify. Others say the entire ceiling subtly pulses, as if it were breathing. Accounts also speak of rituals, not religious but symbolic. Exchanges, pacts. There are no documented explicit sacrifices, but there are testimonies of people entering and others exiting changed. Not physically, but with a new way of looking, as if they had seen something the mind should not register. And this is never spoken openly, only implied, as if naming what happens down there were dangerous. You might be wondering, if all of this is real, why does no one talk? The answer may lie with the figures who control the flow of information. Many journalists who tried to touch this subject had their careers redirected. One of them even reported that after publishing an investigative piece about Buckingham's basements, his home was searched and he received an official warning letter on grounds of national security. And if that sounds exaggerated to you, know that similar cases happened with scholars, maintenance technicians, and even television writers who touched on topics too close to what you're hearing now. It's as if there's an unspoken limit. You can talk about the royals, you can criticize the monarchy, but you cannot ask what lies beneath it. A curious fact: in 2015, a traffic security camera near the palace recorded a strange image during a foggy dawn. A shadowy figure crossed the street toward a side gate and, upon approaching the fence, simply vanished. No editing, no cut. The figure enters the frame and gradually fades as if swallowed by the air. The video was taken down days later. The name Children of the Hidden Crown appears frequently among the few alternative records available. It doesn't refer to specific individuals, but to a kind of inheritance, a lineage not passed by blood, but by pact. These would be entities tied to the very foundation of British power, entities that demand maintenance. Not as kings, but as contracts. The function of these rituals, according to the most respected theorists in this alternative field, is neither worship nor celebration. It is maintenance. The crown, in this context, is not a symbol of authority. It is a key, a seal. And as long as the pacts are upheld, as long as the rituals are performed, the secrets remain locked. But what if, one day, someone gets the ritual wrong? Sometimes the signs are right in front of us all along, but we learn to ignore them. Maybe because they're too small, or maybe because they're too big to accept. What if I told you that the faces of royalty, the ones we see on stamps, coins, official portraits, might hide more than a noble lineage? They might conceal the reflection of something that insists on returning, generation after generation. There is a disturbing pattern in the features of the British royal family. Not just genetic similarities, but the repetition of traits across individuals separated by centuries. What began as a curiosity raised by art historians eventually caught the attention of forensic analysts. And what they found is, at the very least, unsettling. The facial symmetry between Elizabeth I, Victoria, and Elizabeth II is more than compatible. It's nearly identical. Yes, the obvious explanation would be genetics. But the problem is that these traits appear even among members without a direct link in the line of succession. Some comparisons between old paintings and modern portraits show identical eyes, noses, and even body postures. This has led some independent researchers to suggest the possibility of phenotypic duplication, a technical term meaning faces that repeat with abnormal precision. These similarities aren't limited to appearance. Behavior also follows patterns. Similar political decisions, identical gestures in public situations, speeches repeated word for word across decades. Coincidence? Maybe, But what if it's not? There's a little-known episode involving Queen Elizabeth II. In 1983, during an official visit to Canada, one of the accredited photographers captured an image of her with different eyes. It wasn't manipulation. The original photo, now hidden, showed an iris with a double layer and a white reflection that didn't match the ambient lighting. The official explanation was a lens glitch, but the photographer was replaced weeks later and never worked for the palace again. Another point that often goes unnoticed: age. Queen Elizabeth II maintained the same appearance for decades. Sure, good genetics, medical care, all that counts. But why did no one question the fact that, for over 30 years, her image changed so little? And Charles, now king, has displayed since youth a cold, almost clinical demeanor, with the same fixed stare seen in 19th century portraits attributed to Prince Albert. Is it just coincidence? Or are we seeing the same gaze repeated? During ceremonial events, there are records of protocol mishaps that reveal something curious. In 2002, during the changing of the guard, a soldier fainted after crossing paths with a court member who wasn't on the roster. According to witnesses, he said the figure's eyes shone like wet metal. The soldier was transferred, and the incident was never publicly mentioned. Official portraits also carry oddities. Older paintings, when subjected to layer spectrography, revealed that some were painted over earlier images of people with the same face. This was documented by restorers at the Victoria and Albert Museum, who chose not to release the information publicly. The reasoning was preserving historical integrity. But what does that mean in practice? Hiding the fact that time seems to move in circles when it comes to royalty. And then there's Big Ben. A clock, a symbol, a timekeeper. But there are reports, always discreet, always on the fringe, of people who on certain nights hear 13 chimes. Not 12, not 14, 13. A number outside of time. One extra strike, as if marking the beginning of something that should remain asleep. What's most remarkable is that all of this exists in fragments. There is no single piece of proof. But when you start connecting the dots, a picture begins to emerge. A royalty that not only reigns, but returns. That not only holds power, but repeats. Like an echo, an old recording that insists on being heard again and again. These echoes, these repetitions, are not just details. They're codes, marks, clues that perhaps the monarchy isn't a succession of people, but a continuation of a single entity. A face disguised as many. A memory disguised as tradition. A presence that never left, it only changed clothes. Not every throne is made of gold. Some are made of silence, of pacts that span centuries, hidden beneath the veneer of tradition. When we look at the British monarchy, the first thing we see are the symbols, the crown, the scepter, the palace. But what if those symbols weren't merely decorative? What if they were functional? Part of a mechanism that must keep turning to ensure that what lies beneath stays quiet. Everything we've investigated so far, the dungeons, the Tyburn River, the faces that repeat, the hidden rituals, points to a truth that's hard to ignore. There is a parallel, hidden structure that feeds and sustains the monarchy's power. And it doesn't depend on politics, public opinion, or elections. It depends on maintenance, on continuity, on a kind of order that cannot be questioned without threatening everything above it. The crown, in this context, is no longer just a symbolic artifact of power. It becomes an anchor, a link between what the eyes can see and what hides in the dark. It's no coincidence that the coronation ritual is surrounded by ancient protocols, some with origins lost to time. No one touches the crown with bare hands. No one looks directly at it while it's being anointed. Everything is done with a reverence that goes beyond respect. It feels like fear, and that fear shows in the royal family's own reactions. Why do they never address these topics directly? Why do they avoid questions, suppress investigations, silence witnesses? What, exactly, are they trying to protect? The monarchy's reputation, or something far older, far more visceral? In 2012, during the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, a choreographed sequence showed Queen Elizabeth entering a helicopter alongside James Bond. The scene was interpreted as a gesture of modernization. But symbolic analysts saw something else, a ritualized repetition of ascension, escape, and control. The monarchy positioning itself above the national narrative, not as part of it, but as its observer, or even its controller. And when the entire world watched the Queen parachute in during the ceremony's simulation, it laughed. found it lighthearted, amusing. But no one noticed what was really being said. The royals can fly, can fall, can touch the ground and still smile. Because they are always above, always protected. Now think about everything shown so far. The hidden structures, the masked figures, the disappearing bodies, the faces that don't age. Could all of this be just superstition, coincidence, collective exaggeration? Or are we looking at an invisible engineering that sustains one of the world's oldest institutions? If the crown is an altar, then what exactly is being worshipped? And who are the true believers behind this cult? The British monarchy may be seen as the last great theater of Western tradition. But beneath the stage, the backstage tells a different story. A story of buried pacts, bloodless inheritances, and structures that breathe in the dark. All of it hidden in plain sight, in rituals disguised as ceremony, in faces that don't change, in doors that never open. And the scariest part isn't what we know, it's what's still left to discover. This story is just one piece, and one day, you might see the whole puzzle. If this made you think too, subscribe, like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share, because more voices mean more discoveries.